Hello, and welcome to episode 4 of Worldwide Battle Royale. In the last episode, we saw a lot of things happen, including a major war in Africa and the expansion of alliances. So if you didn't see that, make sure you do. But with that, let's get right into it. So Panama and Costa Rica are in a pretty precarious situation because both Brazil and the US are basically forcing them to join an alliance. They're both like, join our alliance or we'll invade you. And Brazil's alliance is taking that a little more seriously, as they declare war on Panama on the grounds that Panama is a U.S. puppet, even though they're not, and obviously they wipe them out. And Panama is now a sovereign part of Colombia, but this also angers Costa Rica and makes them decide to join the U.S.'s alliance just because they really didn't think that was a cool thing to do. Over in Asia, things are really starting to get heated between the Chinese and Indian alliances, and it's all going to boil over the one neutral country left in mainland Asia, besides Malaysia, and that would be Afghanistan. Both countries will declare war on both alliances will declare war on Afghanistan around the same time, and the Chinese alliance will be the first in, taking this panhandle before getting to the mountainous regions and realizing it's kind of hard to invade Afghanistan. Iran will then start sending their own troops into Afghanistan, as well as Uzbekistan, but they'll also be stopped because, again, it's hard to invade Afghanistan. Turkmenistan tries sending their own troops, but again, it's really hard to invade. So Afghanistan is doing pretty fine. Pakistan starts sending their troops in, and they get stopped. Who knew it was so hard to invade Afghanistan, except every country? Well, people forget history in this scenario, so they don't remember how invading Afghanistan is a bad idea. So right now, they're not really technically at war with each other, but that all changes when Pakistan decides to just invade the Iranian parts of Iran, killing some Iranian soldiers. And with that, Iran declares war on Pakistan, and they were somehow really ready for this, taking a ridiculous amount of Pakistani land very quickly. And India was also ready for this, as they start invading into Pakistan, and Pakistan was not ready for this. But obviously the Chinese alliance declares war, and Uzbekistan is looking there, and they're like, no. And this is what happens to Uzbekistan the second that this war starts. Yeah, I don't know what Uzbekistan thought was going to happen. Turkmenistan starts invading into Iran, but it probably won't last very long. As with all of this land now, and without Uzbekistan there, Afghanistan starts really being able to be invaded more easily. But they're still kind of holding out. But now that war is fully on, obviously the Koreas are going to go against each other. South Korea starts invading in the north, and North Korea decides that it's time to launch some nukes. So they actually literally nuke Seoul, which I'll show with a gray dot. And this causes, basically international outrage. Even India's like, you shouldn't have done that, North Korea. And so India actually kicks North Korea out of their alliance, because it's just, that bad. You're not supposed to nuke someone. China, who has nukes, agrees with this, and they know where North Korea's nuclear facilities are. And so they launch a barrage of nukes at all of North Korea's nuclear facilities and at Pyongyang. So the world is probably suffering from very bad levels of radiation right now. But North Korea is absolutely cooked. They lost all their nukes, and they don't really have anything else. So that's that for North Korea. And India kind of just lets it happen because they just don't think that this ever should have happened. Australia is sending in as much support as they can, but there's not really much they can actually do to help their alliance. So the fact that they're in the Pink Alliance isn't really going to affect this war very much. Mongolia starts getting invaded by China, but as promised, Russia is sending aid to Mongolia, because remember they had made a deal with India to help them out in the case of a war with China. So for now, they're only helping them out with support, but Mongolia is being able to hold out because of Russian support. Meanwhile, Afghanistan just kind of loses its government and doesn't surrender, but it's kind of occupied, and it's now a battleground in which Iran is somehow losing, even though they're pretty strong. And India's alliance is just not doing very well. So one place they are doing well is in Myanmar, because Myanmar was a puppet state of China, which means it's not very well defended. And also, that's where most of the Sino Alliance's actual resources are. They also managed to get Malaysia to join them, which is nice, because it just means there's some extra support and one less country they have to worry about joining the other side. Pakistan is continuing to get invaded, but with Chinese support, they're able to take Kashmir, which I'll just say they did remember that they claimed Kashmir for some reason. They didn't remember why, but they do remember that they claimed it. They also managed to push and separate Iran, and Iran is just not doing well. And seeing the bad state of Iran and worrying about Russia, the Pink Alliance is also going to start sending their troops into Iran just in case. So just in case you thought things couldn't get any worse for Iran, they could, and they are. Iran's capital city of Tehran has already been taken, but they still refuse to surrender because they think they have hope. And Russia is seeing this, and they're seeing that this war is very bad for the Cyan Alliance, and they decide that it's now or never. They should actually join the Cyan Alliance in this war. So they don't merge the alliances like they did with the other thing, but Kazakhstan starts seeing a barrage of Russian troops, and they can't deal with this, and China is busy trying to invade Mongolia, so they can't deal with this. China has started a front in Vietnam, which is going decently well, but Kazakhstan decides to surrender before they would otherwise have their entire country taken, which allows Uzbekistan to be recreated pretty easily. Of course, some of their areas are still occupied, but they're starting to push out, and with Russian help, they're actually able to. This allows Iran to start pushing back, and Georgia will start another invasion into Turkey, which forces Turkey to withdraw some of their troops, allowing Tehran to be retaken. Russia then begins an invasion into Manchuria, which is going pretty successful, and China's not really able to stop it because they've been focusing on the south, where they take a decent amount of India's land, including this bit that connects the rest of India through Bangladesh. However, meanwhile, Turkmenistan is just absolutely getting destroyed by Russian and Uzbekistani troops, even having their claim to the Caspian Sea getting lost. Turkey and Russia are stalemated on this line, and then something will happen that will make this even worse, because Serbia decides right now is a good time, since Russia's distracted, to invade into Kosovo and Montenegro. Obviously, they take them. They didn't expect for Russia to declare war on them, and now that Serbia is getting invaded, France has a decision to make: kick Serbia out of the alliance or defend Serbia. And France decides it's now or never and starts sending troops into Russian allies over here, which just brought another alliance into the war. But if you'll notice, France has some allies over here. Things are about to get extremely crazy. As France starts pushing into Poland, Russia has to withdraw some of their troops from China, allowing the Russian Far East to be taken. As Kazakhstan is starting to get liberated, and Mongolia is pretty much abandoned by Russia because they have bigger fish to fry. And so Mongolia was forced to surrender. Russia also abandons their invasion of Turkey. Turkey starts going into Georgia over here, but they mostly start focusing back on Iran. Yeah, so Serbia is actually managing to hold off the Russian troops fairly well, as Austria and Poland are just no match for France and Germany. Hungary starts getting invaded, and the people of Hungary, not wanting this puppet state, decide to switch sides to the French alliance, which allows Serbia to be liberated, as Romania starts getting invaded into. Unfortunately for Hungary, they do start getting invaded, and this front line is kind of starting to stalemate. All of a sudden, Turkmenistan has like a massive battle failure that leads to them losing so much land that they have to surrender. And Pakistan decides that right now is a good time to annex all of Afghanistan without Chinese approval, which makes China mad at them, and so they decide to stop sending aid for a few months, which is a really stupid thing to do, because now India is just pushing all of their troops into Pakistan, and it's working. So the Pink Alliance does have some setbacks, but without Russian aid into Kazakhstan, Kazakhstan pretty much unsurrenders, which means all the land that wasn't already occupied by Russian troops is now liberated, which means Uzbekistan is starting to fail. Meanwhile, Iran is kind of cooked, and they see that they are, but they refuse to surrender because they think their alliance is going to save them at some point. But for now, they are fully occupied. And Egypt sees this as a now or never moment. As with Nigeria, this is still the Nigerian alliance. Nigeria is kind of the leader. And they decide to just launch an invasion into the French troops here, because France is distracted, and as long as France is distracted, they might be able to get all the land they would have wanted, but France stepped in to stop them from getting it. And it's just not going well for the French allies. It turns out that they really did need France to help them. Mali surrenders, and things are just going very badly. With this front dealt with for the Pink Alliance, and seeing their French allies kind of losing, they will decide to start invading into Egypt, which means this entire war from the last episode is reignited. And with most of Egypt's population captured, they decide to surrender pretty early on, like extremely early. They probably shouldn't have surrendered this early, but they do. And now Sudan and Ethiopia are starting to get invaded. Meanwhile, the DRC is just collapsing, but Ethiopia is starting to send their troops up here, which slows this front down a little bit and even allows for Zambia to be invaded. And then Zambia's like, wait, why was I in this alliance? And they switch sides. Meanwhile, I think this was Gabon originally. Yeah, I think Gabon is also getting invaded. So things have quickly took a downturn for Nigeria's alliance. But at the same time, Russia is invading into Turkey, and they're being pretty successful at it. As this front has been stalemated for long enough for them to actually be able to do that. And they're also resending their troops into Kazakhstan as well as Mongolia. And just generally, there's the largest front of the war is this northern front. Pakistan is still not receiving Chinese aid because China's a little bit mad at them for annexing Afghanistan, and the main part of their country is taken, and with that, they surrender, which might have been a big mistake because they probably could have won the war if they hadn't just surrendered. But this is a big turning point as Iran gets kind of liberated. And with this, a lot of troops are withdrawn from Egypt and forced to go over here. Egypt decides to unsurrender at some point as the Nile starts getting freed, which causes these guys to lose even more troops. Bulgaria will join Russia's alliance so that they can take a bit of Turkey, which they do, as the entire Black Sea portion of Turkey is kind of cooked. And India's alliance is pushing back against these, so the Middle Eastern alliance is just not doing very well. With this, the Nigerian alliance is able to start beating back the French alliance over here. And all of a sudden, Liberia joins the Brazilian alliance. And then at the same time, Guinea invades into Liberia. This was complete coincidence. They didn't even know Liberia was in the Brazilian alliance when this happened. But Brazil now joins the war against the African alliance. And they will start sending troops across the ocean, and now the African alliance is not doing so well because Brazil is way stronger. One place they are doing well is that, like, this area is clean. Like, France just picked the wrong allies. But the U.S. decides this is the perfect opportunity to declare war on Brazil's alliance, and they seize pretty much all of Central America and start invading into Colombia, which is actually Panama, which causes Venezuela to be invaded. And this is what happens in Venezuela before the stalemate kicks in. Portugal then decides that they should try invading into Spain to help their alliance out, and that it turns out to go very badly for them as they get crushed. Even just by Spain alone could probably defeat Portugal. And if you think about it, France and the African alliance are at war. The African alliance and Brazil are at war, so Brazil and France are allies. If the U.S. and Brazil are enemies, then that means the U.S. and France are also enemies, and that means that the U.S. is going to start invading into France. And Denmark also starts invading into Germany. They give some land back to Poland, and Poland starts helping them out. That collapses this front finally. And Serbia surrenders pretty much immediately. And just like that, France has pretty much lost the war. They see where this is going, their entire alliance does, and so they all decide to surrender so that they don't lose too much land. The U.S. is mad about this, but what are they going to do? With this, the African alliance is able to start pushing these guys back, and they push them all the way out. And now all the dominoes are going to come crashing down, because Russia is going to put their full wrath into Turkey, and things are not going well for Turkey, as Turkey is forced to surrender. With this, the Levant is like, I'm out. And Egypt is able to be fully liberated since there were mostly Levantine troops. The Levant being like, I'm out, means that Saudi Arabia, which was the Levantine puppet, is also out. And with this, their entire alliance kind of just crumbles, which allows Iran to be fully liberated. And you can see the dominoes are coming crashing down. The US decides to exclusively focus on the Americas for now and is doing very well at it because they're much stronger than probably the entire Brazilian alliance combined, if we're being honest. And so they make landings in eastern Brazil as well as in the populated parts of Brazil, and Brazil just is not able to resist this as well as they thought they would be able to. Argentina decides to join the US, but on the condition that they're considered an equal, which the US accepts. Oh, and the UK had sold the Falkland Islands to Argentina. They didn't understand why they had them. They thought it was really stupid that they did. With this, Chile is kind of the first country to be screwed royally, as their capital is taken, as well as pretty much the rest of their country. Because what are they going to do against Argentina? Brazil is distracted as Suriname is taken, and these two fronts are connected up. While this is going on, Australia decides to switch sides, realizing that it's probably going to be a beneficial thing for them to do. And with this extra boost, that's really all the Indian alliance needed to just start shoving themselves into China, as Russia's crashing down from the other side, and they're finally taking back their own land. China, seeing where things are headed, decides to surrender, or I guess sue for peace is a better word since they're not really surrendering. Kazakhstan is retaken, and everything just kind of falls. South Korea realizes the war is over and leaves, which allows Russia to take North Korea, and Taiwan was part of China by this point, so they also left the war. So that leaves one front left in the war, and it's just not going to go well for Brazil. Brazil's allies, specifically Peru and Ecuador, realize the war is over before Brazil does, as well as Bolivia. But Brazil keeps fighting until all their population centers are taken, at which point they surrender, leaving just Colombia in the war, and they fight till the bitter end for some reason, but they lose. So that is the fighting for this episode done. Let's do the peace treaty now. And these are the borders of the post-war world. So let's just go through everything quickly. The former French allies in Africa were completely dismantled. Some got puppet state status, some didn't, some were annexed. France gets divided up into 3 new countries, and a lot of it goes to Spain. Spain also annexes Portugal. Denmark takes some land from the Netherlands and Germany. Germany loses a lot of land to Austria. Hungary gets annexed into Poland as punishment for rebellion. Serbia becomes a new puppet state. Turkey loses a lot of land to Georgia, as well as some to Bulgaria. Mongolia becomes a Russian puppet, which they weren't supposed to, but they forced it to happen because they had all their troops in Mongolia. South Korea annexes North Korea because no one thought North Korea should still exist, so even though South Korea lost the war, they still get North Korea. China didn't lose too much land because they surrendered pretty early, but they did lose some to Vietnam. They lost their puppet state to India, and they lost some land to Russia up here. Also, they lost all of their allies, so they kind of definitely got a little bit punished by this war. The land is divided up here, as you see. Iran gets some land from Turkmenistan. Uzbekistan gets some land. India takes over half of Pakistan. The rest is made into an Afghan puppet state, because remember, Pakistan annexed Afghanistan. Brazil is split into a free nation and an American puppet. The U.S. directly annexes Suriname, and the rest of the borders are as so, with Mexico gaining a lot of land, and Argentina also gaining a lot of land. And yeah, I think that's pretty much the borders of the world. So with that, I will see you in the next one. Thank you for watching so much.